الحمد لله رب العالمين نحمده تعالى نستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونتوب إليه ونعوذ بالله تعالى من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم أدى الأمانة وبلغ الرسالة ونصح الأمة فكشف الله تعالى به عنها الغمة صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما مزيدا. So why do we study history? You know, it's a question that a lot of people actually go through when we're discussing why we study history. And you hear a lot of people who always say, all you Muslims talk about is your back in the day accomplishments. You know, your grandparents did this, and your father did this, and your Sahaba did this, and so on, so on, so on. This is what we always get from a lot of people. And that's important for us to understand on different levels here, okay? First of all, we don't say our grandparents did so and so on and so on and so on out of mufakhara, just out of arrogance, okay? What we do is we are stating facts. It's also because we know that there are reasons for why we have reached certain heights and why we have reached certain lows. There are reasons why this happens, okay? The number one reason behind any of this is it's the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is that what goes up must come down. This is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying when the Qaswa got a very famous hadith, when his camel was beat, she camel was beat. What happened to the Sahaba? They got sad to the point where the Prophet felt the need to what? To give them an azab, to almost like condole them, right? And tell them that anybody, don't worry, what goes up must come down. Anything that's faster, you'll find something else that's faster. And this is the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there are other reasons where certain things happen. And what we are trying to do here is we're trying to literally talk about the reasons for why we have reached certain heights and why we have reached certain lows. There are reasons for why we have done this, okay? And those reasons are known to a lot of people. A lot of scholars, they have actually gone and analyzed why we have been and why we've gone up and down and so on and so forth. So the background to this course here. The first thing that I wanted to talk to you about is as you know, I do documentary films. This is my secondary profession, I guess, really, if you guys can. And just in November, I had a beautiful opportunity to go away with Sheikh Dr. Abdullah Hakim Quick, very famous historian. Anybody not know Dr. Abdullah Hakim Quick? Everybody knows him? Nobody knows him. Nobody knows him? You don't know him? Really, you know him. Allahu Akbar. So very famous, mashallah, Canadian, African-American historian who has, mashallah, studied in Medina a long time ago. The Sheikh became Muslim in the 70s, and he has been serving the community since then. One of the first imams of the Toronto Jami', the masjid. And, subhanAllah, a sea of knowledge. May Allah Azza wa Jalla protect him and keep him healthy. And what he does is he has an interest in the actual Islamic history. So what he did is he took us on a trip to Spain and to Morocco. And this is all about to talk about why, or the actual history of Spain itself. What happened in Spain when the Muslims were actually there. And it was an eye-opener for me. I've read, subhanAllah, I've read the history of Spain, and it's written everywhere. SubhanAllah, but you'll find that a lot of Muslims don't know about it, and even students of knowledge, at times they don't really read history like that, because most of them are concerned with the ulum that they feel are very crucial for their actual faith. So the ulum of al-hadith, the Quran, tafsir, and so on and so forth. These are a lot of scholars are into this, right? But subhanAllah, they always say to you, and I remember subhanAllah, Shaykh Abdul Rajhi used to always actually say that a student of knowledge should always have some sort of ilmam with history, with thaqafa amma, like just general knowledge of certain things that are just happening around, so he can apply his actual religious knowledge. Okay, so this is something that was really interesting to me, but I didn't get to go into so much details. When I went with the Sheikh, subhanAllah, to Spain, is when I fell in love with what's happening. It's easy for you to go and to say Muslims used to live here, and it's a different thing then when you literally go there and you see things. This picture, the one that you're looking at right now, is a picture that I have taken. And I don't know if you see it, but it is literally in the top parts of this window here. It's a window in the Hamra. It's Arabic calligraphy that's written all around there. This is in Spain. Spain, where nobody speaks Arabic. Nobody speaks Arabic. Arabic is like a weird language there, even though they're very close to everywhere else, right? So I was amazed with the actual the alamat that used to exist there. This cannot be something that the Muslims have done when they lived there for 50 years. This cannot be something that was done when the Muslims were a few people. This cannot be something that was done by Muslims who are weak or Muslims who didn't have some sort of honor. This could not have been done truly by Muslims who are... so turn off these ones and leave those ones on. Yeah, the other way around. Yes, that's good. There, that's good. Okay? This could not have been done by Muslims who were hated by the people. It's huge buildings, huge monuments. طيب. So how did this actually happen? So, Islamic conquest, and this is what I'm going to be talking to you about today, okay? So, from the day Islam actually was spread out, the whole idea behind it was for Islam to be spread out, okay? And historically, I'm going to separate certain things here between conquests and conversions, okay? Because I don't want to place the wrong ideas, because a part of us studying history is for us to also understand why people name things certain way. History is always written in the side of whom? The winner. They say if the sheep, don't they say that? They say if the sheep ever wins, you'll never find the side of the lion on written in any books of history, right? So, conquests were the way that countries or states used to live. This was the way that it was. The Roman Empire, for instance, it expanded through conquests. Okay, the Persian empires just grew through conquest. They didn't have like this whole idea of like geographically, it's here's your limits and you can't go anywhere. No, they always want to expand. And the way that they actually do this is that literally they go ahead and they just take over the next neighborhood and they live in it and they make the people who live there belong to them, and then they move on to the next neighborhood. This is something kind of like what Israel is really doing nowadays. The only country that's actually getting away with doing it nowadays. They just kind of move into the next neighborhood, they make it into whatever they are, then you just move on to the next one, and so on and so forth. So these are conquests, and they were the way to that things happened back then. Okay, and I want to differentiate between what we call conquests and conversions. Conversions is what? Is when you go ahead and you make people become a certain religion. A certain religion. Here we're actually talking about the Islamic conquests. Okay? And the whole point of the Islamic conquests themselves is not to actually convert people, but the whole point behind it was to... You guys know this. The whole point behind it is to do what? Huh? Spread this. Okay, the word spread is... Da'wah. The word is da'wah. The reason why we go into other places and we talk to people, so we give them da'wah. And you will never ever be able to what? To go ahead and to force somebody, okay, a non-Muslim to become a Muslim if you go into his actual land. So this was always the case that has always happened. And from day one Islam came, this was the case. We would go around and we would take over land so we can what? Introduce this religion to the people. And so we can introduce what? Justice that Allah Azza wa Jal has prescribed upon mankind to be spread out. This was not a problem at all. And this, historically, no one ever, back in those days, the Roman Empire saying, why are these Muslims doing it? Because they know that this is the way that actually it works. And the truth of the matter is that Islam spread very, very quickly. Islam spread very, very quickly to the point where, literally, by 22 Hijriya, 22 years after Hijrah, right? Almost the whole of what the Muslims used to call Africa was becoming a part of the Muslim empire. Okay, so if you look at the actual top green part of Africa. So when people say Africa, okay, by the way, so we're clear on this. Africa only included Algeria, the west part of Libya, and included Morocco and Tunisia. This was Africa. Egypt was considered just as what? Egypt was always Egypt. Egypt doesn't care. Egypt doesn't belong to anybody, mashallah. They're their own, alhamdulillah, dunya. So, and this has happened, subhanAllah, during the times of very famous companions. Does anybody know who has like the upper hand? Anybody African here who knows the upper hand in who actually was the leader in bringing Africa into Islam? Umar Abdul As is Misr. Misr, we said it's not Africa. We already established it. Misr is not Africa. Uqba ibn Nafi', Allahu Akbar. Uqba ibn Nafi', my brothers and respected sisters, was a very famous companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he worked very, very hard in going out to Africa specifically, and to what? And to actually bring people into Islam. In Africa at that time, the people that used to live there, and they still live there, people who are called Al-Barbar or Al-Amazigh. Okay, Barbar is like the terrible name for them, which comes really from barbaric, or how barbarian they actually are in a sense, right? It's really what was actually considered the way that it was. He had issues, however, when he was actually taking over Africa. And this was a big major issue for Uqba ibn Nafi', is that the fact that it was such a big land. This is not his picture, by the way, so you're fully aware, okay? This is not a picture of Uqba. I'm just taking a picture of somebody in Africa. That's what I've just taken, okay? The point here is Africa, not the man on the horse, okay? So that's just what I'm trying to actually show here. Every time he would go and he would take over a land, right? And he would expand and leave, go to another land, the people that he would leave would return immediately back, and they would what? And they would fight against the Muslims that he left there. Yani revolutions against Islam for the longest time. To the point where Uqba ibn Nafi' was actually killed in Africa because of what? Because of the Thawrat and these revolutions that always used to happen. So it was a very It was a tough land to be. And it's because the Barbaris, the Amazigh, they were tough people. They weren't people that you can kind of like sit down and talk to them about this. And they had very strong beliefs, and they also they used to really like their lifestyle, and that the Arabs didn't have the same kind of lifestyle, and they didn't have the same kind of languages, and so on and so forth. So this is really the introduction to actually Africa itself. Yalla. Now I want to talk to you about a man here by the name of Musa ibn Nusayr. Okay? So Musa ibn Nusayr is the son of a man named Nusayr. I'm just going to throw some names at you because you need to know these names, inshallah, when we go on the next week, so you can understand these names. So the first name that we talk about here is Uqba ibn Nafi'. Have this man, be very aware of him, okay? The second one here is Musa ibn Nusayr. So Musa ibn Nusayr is a son of he wasn't a companion, he was a tabi'i who became Muslim, his father was an actual, literally a leader in the actual army of Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan. And he, mashallah, very righteous father, good man, and he's reached very high levels in the army of the Umayyi empire, really, if you would call it that. So his son Musa was literally raised with the princes and the leaders. So he learned all types of the coolest things that you can ever imagine. He was a leader in every single way that you can think of. He was also, subhanAllah, considered as a very righteous man. May Allah Azza wa Jalla have mercy upon him. His son, because he grew up in this kind of leadership position, he was given the leadership position at different places. One of them, he was actually given, subhanAllah, one of the things that you have to talk about him, he was responsible for the conquest of Cyprus. Okay, before he actually, so this is a big thing. It's not a small thing. Okay, Cyprus also used to be a Muslim place, if you can believe it or not. And then he was actually given the leadership or the governor of Africa. And this is not Egypt, Africa, all of the Africa itself. He was actually given the leadership. This was in the year 89 Hijri. 89 Hijri. He wasn't a young boy now at this moment. Musa ibn Nusayr was a grown man. And Musa ibn Nusayr was smart in a way. He went about dealing with every single mistake that Uqba ibn Nafi' made. So every time he would go and take over a land in Africa itself, what he would do is he would settle with the people and he would teach them Islam. This was the number one thing. His issue was not that they just become Muslim. No, that they become Muslim and that they learn Islam properly. And the moment he would do that, then he would what? He would hire people from amongst themselves, the people who now become believers, become good religious people, from them, so they can actually what? Protect him from their own tribes. See what's happening here? So basically what he's doing is he realized the fact that the reason why Uqba bin Nafi' wasn't doing well is because he makes people become Muslims and he move on to the next tribe. And this is Africa's far away. And then I want you to look at Africa's really far away from the real Muslim. Like if you look, it's the far west part of this map here in Africa, right? And the Muslim empire is really literally all the way in, if you look at it, Medina. Or at that time, where was it? Dimashq, Allahu Akbar. So it's far away from them. And he wouldn't have enough people, so he would take over the place. What Musa ibn Nusayr did is he basically said, okay, well, if this is the case, then we're just going to take it slow. We will just take it slow and we'll take it one step at a time. He was a genius leader. From one of his geniuses, right, the genius ideas of how genius he was, is that this man here came about. Tariq ibn Ziyad. Tariq ibn Ziyad is a Berberi from the Amazigh. Does anybody know what the Amazigh look like, by the way? What do they look like?
White.
Huh?
White.
They're what?
White.
They're European. They're like green eyes, blonde hair. These guys, I don't even know what they're doing in Africa, but they're like European. They look really European. Okay? So this is what Tariq ibn Ziyad used to look like. He was almost European. And you see him, blue eyes. If you actually go and you look into the real Berbers pictures on YouTube and so on, they have like blonde hair and they live in Africa. Which is the strangest thing ever. And they say Africa has everybody. Wallahi alhamdulillah minna. So he was a Berberi man and he was made a leader by Musa ibn Nusayr. And he was a righteous religious leader who spoke the language of the local people. طيب. Excellent leader, my brothers and respected sisters. طيب. Those are the people who are what? Who were running Africa at that time. So, Tariq ibn Ziyad was the actual leader on a place called, anybody know Tangiers right now. He was the actual person who was actually the governor of it, if you would really call him that. They always had dreams of going into Andulisia. Muslims have always had dreams of going to Andulisia, my brothers and respected sisters. During the times of Uthman ibn Affan, for instance, the Muslims tried to actually enter into Constantinople, which is Istanbul nowadays, right? And they couldn't do it. And Uthman ibn Affan used to have the very famous saying when he said what? Tariq al-Tabari, he said that Uthman ibn Affan said that Constantinople, the Istanbul, we will not be able to enter it from this side. We have to enter it from the other side, from the eastern side of it. So basically right through Al-Andalus. You have to go around the world itself to get to the actual Andalus. I'm going to show you the actual image really. If you're looking at whether, he's basically saying that Muslims would have to go around into Europe itself to actually enter into modern day Turkey nowadays. But there were always challenges in how the Muslims should enter into Andalus. One of the first challenges that we actually had about Andulisia was Muslims didn't really have the ability or the expertise in fighting in waters. And they didn't have like boats, big large boats. And this is not something that you can just walk into. Okay, so this was a major issue. They didn't use them, they didn't have enough experiences in them at all. They had them, but they didn't have enough experience to the point where they can actually go and fight wars in them, in a sense. A second challenge that they used to always have is that Musa ibn Nusayr used to always make sure his back is covered before he enters into a land. This would be a challenge if you go into Andulisia, looking at the actual the geography of it right now, because Spain pretty much ran these a couple of, I think there are 3 islands. They call the Balearic Islands. They call it just Al-Bilyar. I don't know what they're called in Arabic really. I think in English is the Balearic Islands, and these islands were actually run by Spanish people. And he had a problem with this. He said, if you actually enter, then that means what, you'll keep your back open, and you can actually get attacked from one of these islands. The third issue that they had was the fact that even in Morocco itself, in Africa itself is what they call, there were cities and ports that actually used to belong to Spain. Right? From one of them is Ceuta, for instance. Ceuta was a port that was owned by Spain. So you can imagine you're actually what? You have 2 different people you're going to attack ahead, and you have somebody on your left-hand side and somebody on your right-hand side, both of them behind you, and you're going to attack somebody. This is a dangerous position for you to place yourself in. And because the way that Musa, he understood the fact that this is not something that you actually want to do at all. Yeah. The third issue that they actually had so let me talk about the second one here, about the third one here. So Ceuta was actually run by a man by the name of Julian, okay, and he was the governor of Ceuta in itself, okay. And he has a very famous, he was really good, he had a good relationship with the king of Spain, who was previous, his name is, they call him Mutesha, or Watisa, in English is really what his name is, right? And this was a king that was literally right before the king that was at that time running the kingdom of Spain. So he was a man who had some sort of alliances with Spain. Okay, Julian had some sort of alliances with Spain itself. But I mean, subhanAllah, one of the things that to even mention right now at this moment here is that we have a king by the name of Rodriguez or Roderick, right? And this Roderick guy made like a revolt really against Wazika, right? And he took over, but still Julian could not dare to actually step into and fight against this man. And if he would ask him for help at any given time, he would have to actually help him out. I'm going to come back to this relationship in a little bit of time, inshallah, but I want to talk to you about the challenges specifically right now. The fourth challenge that they actually had, which is really important, is the fact that there weren't enough Muslims. There was a serious lack of Muslims this whole time, from the time of from the moment they started thinking of Andulisia. There weren't enough Muslims to go ahead and to just embark upon such a big, huge mission, right? And also, in exchange for that fact, there was a big, huge number of Christians living in Andulisia. They've been there for hundreds of years. So, and this is an established empire, and we're talking about that time. Really, the Muslim empire just been around for like 80 something years, not even that many years, right? 80 something years, really, if you think about it. The most important factor or challenge that they had at that time is the fact that they did not know much at all about Andulisia. When you go somewhere, when you go to Egypt, for instance, what you do is you send some people to check it out. They tell you, okay, well, here's what kind of land it is. It has, deserts, it has water, it has this, it has that, right? And you come back and they didn't have that kind of relationship. The people that they were not trustworthy who would describe to them the actual lands themselves. They knew certain things about it. They knew that it was very mountainous, right? Very mountainous region if you've ever been to it. They knew that there's lots of rivers, so you can't just go directly. You have to kind of zigzag around things. They knew that there was a lot of valleys. They knew that there was a lot of challenges in the geography itself of Andulisia, and this was a concern to them. They needed someone who knew it inside out before they actually can make this step into it. So this was really the issue they have. So they came up with solutions. The first solution about the fact that they didn't have ports is they started building ports and ships. And Musa ibn Nusayr, subhanAllah, as soon as he actually thought about the opening, the first thing he actually did is he started what? Establishing ports. Ports in every single city that he can actually find, he will find a port and he will start to build boats. This was another thing. The second thing that he would want to fix is that he started teaching all the people who used to live there Islam. This is something that we talked about earlier already, because this was a part of another solution of another problem, which is to secure himself. But now he's actually what? He's teaching people Islam so they become Muslims, and then they can actually fight for the sake of Islam itself. So now you don't need support from the Arabic land, really, in a sense, or from the Arabs all the way in Damascus, or you don't need the actual big army of the Muslims. You can actually do it from the people that you have, the locals, the Africans. And this is very important, by the way. If anyone was actually say to you that the armies that actually went to Andulisia, they were Berbers, they were Africans. And don't nobody say anything else about this. This is the case it is. And you have a guy who's shaking his hand. This is what's happening. The vast majority of them were actual Berbers. Okay, without any doubt. طيب. He also did something else that's very interesting. He started to appoint leaders from the actual what? From the people who used to live there. So Tariq ibn Ziyad is a perfect example. Okay, we have Tarif ibn Malik as also is a perfect example. Okay, those are leaders who were what? From the locals. It's very easy for me to come here, right? And coming from Africa, and assuming that Africa is a bigger country or a more powerful country than Canada is, or a place than Canada is, and you come here and you tell white people what to do, right? But it's another thing for me to go ahead and come back to this country and then start to what? Train people and then give the leadership to them. People will listen to their own people a lot more, especially when they speak the language. They know their thaqafa, they know their actual culture, they know all these kinds of things. So this was something that's very crucial that actually was needed, because there's no way you can actually raise up the morale of people. Arabic was not very well spoken at that time in Africa, right? It's only a couple of years, not too much time. So you imagine that you're starting to stand here and you want to speak to the army, telling them go ahead and fight, and you're speaking to them in a language that they don't understand. Everybody just kind of yawning and just, like, what's the guy saying, So he would hire people from the actual locals so they can actually run their actual country, the actual conquest themselves. And then he went ahead and he conquered the Balearic Islands. These islands that he had issues with, he just went ahead and he took them. It was very easy because they're just small islands and they didn't, nobody really had any issues. Plus the fact that, I'm going to point this out to you, brothers, is that when Muslims go into a place and they take it over, usually the people who are living there, they were always happy with the Muslims. And you'll never ever find a place where the Muslims were actually kicked out from the people within the actual city that they take over. It's always a revolution that happens from outside of the action. And you'll see how this actually happens out even in what we're talking about here when we're talking about Andulisia as a whole, inshallah. طيب. Now I want to talk to you about the man, his name is Julian. Julian was the governor of Sabta. Julian had a good relationship with the king previous to Spain. The king at that time, his name was Rodriguez. Okay, and Julian had a very good relationship with the king that was before him, and didn't like the fact that Rodriguez took over. But he couldn't fight him, so he had nothing else to do with him. Plus, they say, and there are some rumors, they say that when Roderick took over, he took the children of Julian and he raped them. He raped his daughter, and that he did some really really horrible things to the people, to the point where Julian just didn't like him. And Julian had very good relationships with the actual previous king's kids. The children of the previous king, they were all They were all held down, and Julian had good relationships with them. So what's happening now is that Julian is having some concerns. Seeing the Muslims are spreading all around him. He's in a small city called Sabta. It's a port, so it's an important city, right? But he's all alone. The king of Spain that we think is his friend, he's really not his friend. There's some issues happening internally. There's some serious issues happening internally between them, right? And he's angry with them in the first place. And he's seeing that Muslims can take over Sabta at any given time. And he literally, what's happening is at this moment, he's actually thinking, if Muslims take over Sabta, where will I go? I can't go into Spain. I don't like this guy. He doesn't like me anyways. So what he does is he actually makes the first step. And he's the one who actually literally sends a message to Tariq ibn Ziyad. Tariq ibn Ziyad at that time was a governor of Tangiers. And he literally gives them a simple offer. And the offer is, listen, we will give you access to Sabta port, Okay, we will give you intelligence, anything that you actually need to know about Andulisia, and all of this, in a sense, in exchange for a couple of things, is that you don't actually take over Sabta as a city. You can use the port, but you don't take over Sabta as an actual port, and that when you cross over to Andulisia, we have some lands that were confiscated by this previous king, by this king that's coming over. We just want these lands back. Deal or no deal? That's a good deal. It's a crazy deal. All they wanted is just some land. All they wanted, like literally, we give you anything you want. We can give you access, so you can go through it. Some historians say that he even gave him access to the boats themselves that he has. He gave him, some historians also say that he gave him access to the city, to actual Andulisia itself, that he would put his men on the boats that are going across from his, so people would stay there and they would find out, and he would give him all the kind of information that he needs to know about Andulisia at that time. All we want from you is for you not to touch Sabta. We don't want you to fight with Sabta as a city. And the second thing is, we want these lands. First of all, my brothers and respected sisters, as Muslims, you have to understand at that moment, they're not looking for dunya. This is a time of real jihad, by the way. And this is the times when Muslims, real religious Muslims, when you would ask them, do you want to live by Mecca or Medina? Or you want to be in Ard al-Jihad? You want to be in Asham? Or you want to be in Africa, Andulisia? They would say to you what? We want to be where jihad is. This was the dream of Muslims, because they didn't have any other reasons to live except for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And now you have all these kinds of people who are just literally coming to you saying to you, oh, listen, just give us some land. And so immediately you start to realize what type of people you're dealing with. It's a good deal. So immediately, Tariq bin Ziyad, he sends off to Musa ibn Sayr and tells him, you know what? This is what the deal that I'm actually getting. And they immediately take it upon to take that deal itself. At that time, the Amir al-Mu'mineen was Walid ibn Abdul Malik, and they came up with this leader, Turayf ibn Malik. And Turayf ibn Malik was given a small company, not even a small company of 500 people. Okay, the 500 people, 400 of them were walking, and 100 of them were on horses. And he was told to go for a Sariyah. We don't want a lot of people. Just those 500 people. You go over and you land, and when you get to the other side, we just want you to take information. This was an intelligence mission. Don't go fight, don't go crazy, don't go killing people, don't go, none of that. Just go over there and find out what's happening and come back to us. He landed in a city until today is known as, that's the airport, Tarifa. The city is actually named after this man. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. This mission, my brothers and respected sisters, happened in Ramadan of 91 Hijri. 91 years after the hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ is when this is the first time that actually Muslims entered or went into the European side as what? As conquerors. When Turayf ibn Malik lands there, subhanallah, he didn't find much issues at all. Even the Hamiya, the people who were actually supposed to protect where he landed, he fought with them, and immediately he captured a lot of subhanallah war spoils, and he went and he looked around and he found a lot of information and came back with as much information as he can. And it was a success on so many levels, this actual mission that he went upon. And came back. And just like I said to you, the city right now until today is actually Nom Tarifa. The city, this is where you actually go if you go to it. Exactly a year afterwards, my brothers and respected sisters, is when the actual official conquest started. Musa ibn Sayr at that moment, he sent Tariq ibn Ziyad over. Tariq ibn Ziyad was a very, very powerful leader for the Muslim army. And happened in Sha'ban of 92 Hijriya. So 91 Ramadan before was the first time that who went over? Tarif ibn Malik, صح? And the second time, I want you to know these dates. I kind of want you to know these dates, okay? And 92 Hijriya, Tariq ibn Ziyad, he goes in Sha'ban. He goes in Sha'ban. I want you to notice these months, eh? Like nowadays, what happens when Ramadan is approaching? Yeah, man, this is we're practicing our sleeping time. Like I'm asking for days off from my work. I mean, even as I work in the masjid, I'm asking for days off. Like it's Ramadan, yeah, give me some time off. But these guys are what? They're embarking upon conquest. They're embarking upon what? Taking over and fighting and stuff. They're not going over so like, hey, we'll just go hang out in Spain. No, these guys are going over to fight. And Ramadan or not Ramadan, this is the month that you actually, if you have to go, you have to go without any problems at all. 7,000 Muslims actually went with Tariq bin Ziyad at that time. And subhanAllah, there is a narration that speaks about this. And this is the picture that was actually, that describes it. They say that Musa bin Nusayr, at the time when all of the boats were disembarking, going over, he was crying. Making dua, tears coming down, just literally making his face sweat. All he kept on asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give success to the Muslims. So Ibn Sayyid was a righteous man, my brothers and respected sisters. This is one of the things that you will never find any narrations that speak to you about Musa ibn Sayyid, anything about a righteous man. And these kinds of things don't happen in the hands of evil men. These things happen in the hands of righteous men, without any doubt. The more righteous you are, the easier Allah Azza wa Jal makes things happen for you. So Musa ibn Nasir literally is actually sitting there crying, calling upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make things easy, to make things to protect the lives of the Muslims and for them to come back winning, and to come back for them healthy, really, in a sense, and with some sort of conquest. Tariq bin Ziyad lands in an area that right now is known as Gibraltar. And Gibraltar really is how you pronounce Jabal Tariq in the quick Berberi way of actually speaking. Okay, so Gibraltar right now belongs. It's a British. It actually belongs to Britain now. Okay, when I drove by there, I actually see it like this big, huge mountain. That's literally almost like in the middle of the water that you look at it. You can see it from Spain and you can actually see it from Morocco as well. And when he lands there, they name the place immediately after him. And he doesn't find any issues whatsoever. He goes, the small number of people that are there, he goes and he beats them. And when he lands there, he gives people the three options that Muslims give when they go as conquerors. My brothers, there are three options that Muslims, when they go as conquerors, they give. The first one is Islam, become Muslims. There's no problems with this. Second thing is jizya. Third thing is war. Tayyib, very good thing. The whole point of us going there in the first place is so we can commit to da'wah. Right? We want to call people to Islam. We want to bring people from the darkness of shirk to the lightness of tawheed of Allah Azza wa Jal. We want to bring people from the hellfire into the Jannah. This is a very easy thing that we have to deal with. This is why we're going there. We're not going there for land. We're not going there for money. We're not going for any of that nonsense. So this is the first thing. We go there and we give to them. This is Islam. You want it? You can take it right now. Now we don't really want it. Well, let us show it to you. But while we're actually showing it to you and how Islam itself works, and if you want to live amongst us as Muslims, and you want us to run the government for you in the city itself, then you actually have to pay the jizya. And the jizya, my brothers and respected sisters, at that time, does anybody know what it used to be? Does anybody know what it is? Dinar. Wahid. Every year, for every single adult who's capable of fighting. Those are the conditions. Not anybody who's just anybody who's like, if you're weak, you can't work, you get the money from him, right? This is less than how much? This is less than the actual what? Than the actual zakah that we as Muslims pay. And just so people talk a whole lot of nonsense about the jizya itself, jizya was like the smartest thing that you can ever think, because anybody can actually afford it. If you actually work, anybody can actually afford it. If you actually work, okay? Plus from it, you're getting all the services that Muslims are getting. You're getting the streets fixed for you. It's like literally the systems of taxes itself. You're getting protected by the actual army itself that everybody else is paying for what? Through what? Through zakah. So there's really no issues with the actual jizya itself. You can literally live as a people of kitab, Ahl Kitab, amongst the Muslims with no problems at all. You pay 1 dinar this once a year and you're good to go. You have no problems. You don't want to do this and you don't want to do this, then you gotta fight. There's no problems. We didn't come for dunya. That's what they say. And we're not staying for dunya either. So we might as well fight. These men at that moment when they met Tariq ibn Ziyad, this guy is coming to our land. It's crazy. You think you can take over and you have all this nonsense talk? They said, no, we're going to fight. We're fighting you, bro. This is what's happening. Like we're going to go what? We're going to go all out. And they fight and they get beat. They get beat, my brothers. Destroyed. To the point where they send off to Rodriguez, the king in like what? In the actual capital at that moment. Does anybody know what it used to be? Toledo. Does anybody know what Toledo is in Arabic? Tlaytal, yeah. So it was Toledo, okay? And they send off to Roderick and they say to him, come over, help us. These guys are destroying us. Literally one of the things that they actually say, قَالَ لَا نَدْرِي أَهُمْ مِنْ أَهْلِ الْأَرْضِ أَمْ هُمْ مِنْ أَهْلِ السَّمَاءِ. We don't know where these people came from. They fight with seriousness. We don't know if they're people from the skies or people from the ground. The way that they actually fight, they fight like they just literally want to win or want to die. One of the two. This is the difference between somebody who fights for i'tiqad, aqidah, versus somebody who fights for what? Something that may come to you, something that may leave, right? Because if you fight for i'tiqad, right, what happens? Both ways you're winning. So it really doesn't matter. You do as best what to do. Any one of the two options is good for you. But if you're fighting for the sake of dunya, you're fighting for a good salary, like right now you become a part of the army, for instance, okay? And you fight for like your good salary, any way that I can sneak out of doing some work, I'll do it. I don't need this. I don't need to do this, until you get caught. Like I don't need. But if I'm fighting for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I know both ways are good ways for me, then what? I'll do whatever that I actually have. So he couldn't. Roderick at that time, he didn't listen. He thought this was nonsense. And he said these are a bunch of hoodlums. These Muslims are not even, we don't even know them. We don't even know anything about them in that sense, right? How did they even come across? And what they're going to, literally what he's thinking is that these people are going to come across, they're going to grab some war spoils, some sort of war booty, and they're going to leave. Yeah, I don't have no problems with them. We didn't. Tariq ibn Ziyad just didn't leave, just kept on moving forward. Just kept on moving forward. Until Roderick was told again the second time. And in this time he was told, you're taking this too lightly. Come to us by yourself. When an army is asked to bring the king of it, what does that mean? Bring the biggest army that you can. There's no joke whatsoever about this here. We are going to fight with you no matter what. And this is when Roderick gets angry. And he comes out. And he comes out decked out. And subhanAllah, they actually tell in narrations that he has gold all over his body. This guy comes out like the conqueror. Man who loves dunya. He wasn't a king there for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so it's dunya. So he's dressed up in his gold, dressed up in the best of clothing that he has. He has all of his army in an army of no less. SubhanAllah, some of the people actually say people say that it's 100,000 soldiers in his army. At that time, Tariq ibn Ziyad, how many did he have? 7,000 people. 7,000 people with him, right? So when Tariq ibn Ziyad hears about this, what does he do? He sends back to Musa ibn Nusayr, help me out, man. There's 100,000 people coming here. We got about 7,000. What's happening? So Musa ibn Nusayr, he sends them what? Logically, who would he send? Huh? Yeah, but who? You need leaders, names of leaders. Tarif. Says some Tarif with 5,000 people. It's 12,000 people coming out to you. Okay, it's not still 12,000 people. What? Yani subhanAllah, I read about the actual thing, and sometimes, yes, I sometimes think that maybe the Muslim sources have exaggerated the number itself, right? But the lowest number that anyone has mentioned that Roderick had was 40,000 people. And the largest number that anyone said the Muslims actually had was about 15,000 people. If we go with the largest number, 15,000 of Muslims, versus the smallest number of 40,000 people, that's still a huge number. But it's not a strange thing for him to have 100,000 people. Why not? He was the king, and people have been there for years on end, you know what I'm saying? And 15,000 Muslims wouldn't have made sense. Right? Because they didn't have the boats. The big issue was the fact they didn't have the boats, they didn't have the numbers of people in the first place. So about 12,000 people would have been a perfect number. 7,000 plus the 5,000 that he actually has. So these are numbers that actually make sense. Fadl. Yeah.
So are Muslims at this point in the mainland or still in Jabal Tariq?
So they actually passed Jabal Tariq, and now they're actually in the actual green land that's just literally near it in itself. Okay? And I'm just going to talk about what happened at this moment here. When Tariq hears about the fact that these men are coming about, he looks for this area. And now there is a very famous speech that Tariq himself has said. Now the scholars, or some historians, historians say that he stood up and he said this lengthy speech. And everybody knows it, right? Like everybody, what? What's behind you? Adu amamakum wal bahr. And some people say that he burnt the ships, the boats that they brought him over. Nobody's fleeing here. Nobody is fleeing. We're going to fight. I spoke to Dr. Abdullah Hakim quick about this, and he says that this wouldn't make sense. First of all, he says there is no logical or there is no accurate narration of the fact that he would have burnt the ships themselves. Number two, this is a righteous man, my brothers, who has been given a responsibility to take over us. It doesn't make sense. No army man would do this. Come on, yes, he's a righteous man, and yes, he's mutahammis, and yes, he wants this, and yes, all of these things. But he's still a responsible man who knows that the fact that what al-harb, kar wa far, al-harb, any war, it includes what? You getting some and you backing off some, you getting some and you backing off some. This is what war is. There's no way you can expect a leader like Tariq, right, Ibn Ziyad, who doesn't know these kinds of things. He says, no, we're going to die here today and we're never going to run away. That doesn't make any sense. Plus the fact that we also have other narrations on the fact that these boats didn't actually belong to him. They would belong to whom? They would belong to Sabta. That's one narration, okay? And that wouldn't make sense. But the second narration is the fact that they actually belong to the Muslim, the Muslim nation. There's no way he would have done this, and Musa bin Nusayr, the righteous old man, would allow it to happen. Or even al-Malik, Abdul Malik, would allow this. Some sort of discussion would have happened about it even afterwards. So these are the opinions that Sheikh Abdullah has about it. He said it doesn't make any sense. But there is no mania from the fact that he would say to them, you guys are not going back unless there's a last resort. You're not going back. We're going to fight until what? There is no other way around it. And as soon as he actually gives the speech itself, and the speech itself was very, very, got him moved. And then he looks for a land for him to actually find. And this is the very famous battle. You will find it, you can actually find it in Wikipedia. Even the actual non-Muslim sources actually talk about how the battle itself is actually happening. The Wadi, or the valley of Birbat, was a valley that was very useful for Tariq and Tarif to actually have. It was, this is the picture of it there. It literally was actually protected by these high lands, mountains behind it, and there was water that would run on one side. So literally you'd be able to protect yourself from the back and from both sides, and you'd be able to fight the actual adu from one side immediately. And Rodriguez comes. And as soon as he actually comes, my brothers and respected sisters, 100,000 people, I want you to think of this, okay? Against those 12,000 Muslims. And they get annihilated. They lose so badly that it would have taken a miracle. Yani if you actually go and you Google this battle itself, even the non-Muslim sources don't know how to explain it. They lost. The Muslims mopped the floor with them. It was absolutely like one of the most amazing things that would have happened. And why? Why? Yeah, fighting for Allah. These are people who are fighting for Allah Azza wa Jal. Those are people who are fighting what? For the dunya. When you see the dunya fleeing from in front of you, you run after it. But when you see what you are seeking in front of you, you run towards it. Into one of the two things. It's either shahada or you win. And both of them is what? Is a winning situation. Without any doubt. This was the biggest battle. And the most, subhanallah, battle that was such a bloody battle. That even the honored ones from the army of Rodriguez were killed. And as soon as they finished, Tariq ibn Ziyad didn't even wait for any other time. Immediately after 8 days, of this actual battle itself, he decides to actually move over, heading towards Toledo, where we just beat these guys here. The best way for us to go is to go what? Right to their capital land. And at that moment in Toledo, what's happening? They're looking for a new king. Their king just got there. Nobody knows where he is. Nobody knows where he is. Like, he just fled the actual war itself or the battle itself, and nobody knows exactly where he is. And this decision of Tariq to actually move over caused a little bit of tension in his ranks, and also caused a little bit of tension in the Musab ibn Nusayr and so on and so forth. But he had some really good reasons for it. And one of the first things that had for good reasons that he said that the army right there at that moment, they had such high morale that this is the time for them to go. They just beat so many people. This is the time for them to immediately go. Also at the same time, the opposition army, they were just destroyed. They don't know what's going on. Like, imagine if you actually come after them now, they would run even further. Like, you don't give them some time so they can what? So they can go ahead and actually realign themselves. None of that. He says his idea is for him to go ahead and to immediately go after them without anybody stopping them. He was also very keen on catching Rodriguez. And Rodriguez at that time, Roderick, he wasn't around. And he was saying if he catches him and he actually kills him, it would make most of the people who believed in him as like a holy figure of some sort, because people at that time, they used to believe that the king was what? Was a representative of God on earth. Like, this is what they used to think, right? So if you kill him, that they know what? Really, the Christian God that you have here doesn't really, it's not the one. Let's might as well follow these Muslims here. And he decided on moving on immediately. But I will keep the moving on part, inshallah, for next week, because I don't want to give you too much right now. But very exciting things happen, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, in the next couple of weeks, and this is only going to get better, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. I will stop here, inshallah. I'm actually not going to allow you guys to give any questions, because I do want you to go through a couple of weeks of this, and then we can actually come up with certain questions afterwards, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Barakallahu fikum. Assalamu alaikum.